Yes, folks, hello, welcome once again to Monetary Games and Collectibles. It's time for another action figure review here on the channel, and as you can see on the screen in front of you right now, today's installment is going to be taking a closer look at the G.I. Joe Classified Retro Cardback Crazy Legs figure. So stick around, I'm going to give you all the ins and outs, ups and downs that you need to know about Crazy Legs, so if you've been thinking about picking one up for yourself, you'll have plenty of information to make a good, solid purchasing decision around. I'm going to start by jumping back in time and taking a look at the packaging on the day it arrived on my doorstep, then come back to the present day where we'll take a closer look at the figure, starting with the aesthetic and the visual experience, moving on to the articulation and posability, have a rundown of all the accessories and see whether they're added value, pop him next to a couple of other G.I. Joe Classified series figures, and then give you a nice 360 look of him. And with all that said and done, should have loads of thorough info to know whether Crazy Legs is the one you want to crack your wallet or purse open for. So let's get into it and let's take a look at the figure, and let's jump back in time to visit past Chris taking a look at the packaging. Here we go. Okay, then folks, well, here is Crazy Leg in packaging, and it's the standard retro, G.I. Joe retro cardback setup with the image up the side there, going for that kind of digital version from the later times. The artwork's pants again. I'm sorry, guys. It just doesn't... there's just something just does not look right, you know what I mean? I know somebody was rounding them out saying it's not AI, but freaking well is. But then, more importantly, you've got the character and all the goodies in the blister on the front there. Then on the back, the file card with all the biographical information in various different languages, the cross-promotion into the other characters in this wave, the legal bollocks and malarkey across the bottom, and then the import sticker from the retailer I use over here that imports. That's it. That's what you get with a retro card back. Not a lot of ground to cover there. So I'm going to go and crack Crazy Legs open, get good and hands-on, get some man-child playtime in, pose him up, put him in some dios, see what he looks like displayed next to a couple of other classified figures, jot down a few review thoughts, and then I'll come back and share those review thoughts. So stick around. Future Chris is going to be with you in 3, 2, 1. Okay then, folks, well, here is Crazy Legs then, just the core figure as he came out of packaging, and we're going to talk about the aesthetic and the visual experience with him now. And here's a full head-to-toe look of the figure, and as you can see, pretty appropriate for a retro cardback edition of the character. It is heavily inspired by the original A Real American Hero vintage figure. Starting with the colour scheme, we can see that it's the grey jumpsuit with the red padded sections on it there, with almost identical placement of the red padded sections with the core torso, the little trimmings on the shoulder, and the inside leg. Even down to the placement of the knife sheath and the grenades, which were in the same spot on the vintage figure there as well. And then, of course, the brown parachute webbing and the brown gloves too from the original figure design. They've obviously updated him a little bit in the 6-inch plastic form. There's more texture, more depth. There's little touches like his grenades and his knife sheath are on a set of straps, a bandolier type thing, and so on and so forth. But broadly speaking, it is a like-for-like update of the original vintage figure. Getting in a bit closer, and let's talk about the head sculpt. This is the polarizing point, I think, for most G.I. Joe Classified Series collectors, the screaming mouth head sculpt. Now, on a technical level, it's a good head sculpt, up to the usual G.I. Joe Classified Series standard. Great facial features in there, good paint applications to bring it to life, the eyebrows, the eyes, the teeth and the tongue inside the mouth, the way the cheeks are raised around the shouty mouth, everything's working. His hair's sculpted as well and is appropriately kind of flat if he's been wearing his helmet. Let's get him in focus there. There we go. So fundamentally, it's a good head sculpt in the sense of the technicals of it. But of course, the screaming mouth with no alternative head swap to a more kind of vanilla or stern looking face like we often get with our G.I. Joe Classified means that he looks a bit odd. He looks a bit out of place in display with the other figures. Or if, like me, I was trying to take some photographs with him yesterday while I was jotting down some thoughts for the review, it kind of limits your options because there's a certain type of vibe, a certain tone to the photo or the display that the screaming mouth is asking for, and you don't have many other screaming mouthed characters, head swaps in the line to kind of make it look like it's a shouty, combat scene or suspended him from the ceiling in a skydive type thing. So I like it. I do like it, actually. I think it's got a lot of personality and a lot of character, but I do totally get that it limits your options and it kind of makes things a little bit more complicated when it comes to how you might want to engage with and interact with your figures. Now, if you've got the Night Force version from the HasLab, you can do a head swap. That's all fine. I saw some folks on one of the Facebook groups I'm in doing some head swaps, messing around with Lifeline's head, actually, which I thought was a pretty good match. Sorry, I apologize if you're watching. I've forgotten who you were who showed us it. But, you know, there's options in terms of head swaps. But, yeah, it's a bit... you're either into it or you're not. Moving further down into the figure, we can see lots of sculpted detail to give it depth and texture and bring it to life. The padded sections on the core of his torso and on the inside of the legs are all sculpted in. We've got the sculpted details on the webbing here to bring it to life. The brown straps on the parachute webbing does look a bit plasticky, as does the hands, the brown glove hands, which I suppose is okay-ish, but I'd like that to have a little bit more texture to it as well. Sorry, not texture, in the colour, just something a little bit more blended into the rest of the figure in a way, but that's fine. Lots of sculpted detail in his jumpsuit too. You can see like where it's all bunching up around the wrist and up here at the top by the shoulders, bunching up here around where the straps sit, around the groin, and then of course the bits are bunching up as it's tucked into his boots at the bottom to give it that texture detail. Sculpted pockets everywhere for carrying all his gear while he's leaping out of planes and helicopters. You get a good shot of the sculpted detail on the padded sections on his arse there, but also things like this at the back there, that kind of leathery look in the section here at the back. The colour scheme's good. Well, certainly in terms of the grey and the red on the core uniform. Like I say, the brown on the straps look a bit plasticky to me, but it's fine. He's got quite a bit of shelf presence actually, with that flash of red on top of the grey. Kind of stands out well against your kind of core combat greens and khakis, your kind of general fatigue colours and what have you. So he sits nicely in amongst a little grouping of other characters. I'll pop him next to a few kind of combat green folks before, but it gives him a bit of shelf presence. He's eye-catching in that respect, particularly when he's got his helmet on, which is adding another big flash of red at the top there, which I'll show you in a little while. Nice symmetry to the character as well. They're really good at this with the G.I. Joe classified stuff, giving it that symmetry, so it makes it really appealing to the eye. So overall, aesthetically, I'm kind of going for a sort of 10 o'clock-ish, 9 o'clock-ish. It's not a full down, but it's not a full thumbs up, because I think mileage will vary depending on the head sculpt. I like the head sculpt, but as I said before, it's limited my own imagination in terms of what I wanted to do with him when I was taking some photos and when I was displaying him. And of course, that experience will be the same for many other viewers of this. And so aesthetically, he's good. He's solid. He is solid. And if you've got head swap opportunities to allow you to use the character in various different ways, then that's great. But ultimately, the head sculpt kind of really narrows down that aesthetic element of the screaming mouth. The visual experience that gives you really narrows down kind of how you might want to engage with the figure, in my humble opinion. So there we go. Okay, well, there's the aesthetic rundown. Let's now take a look at his articulation and posability, shall we? And before I get into that, folks, as usual, it's fairly standard G.I. Joe Classified Series articulation. There's one slight difference, and it's negligible. So if you're already pretty familiar with the way that G.I. Joe Classified Series figures articulate and you've got no interest in this section, I've put timestamps in. You can jump forward a chapter and go and take a look at the section where I run down the accessories and added value. However, if this is the first G.I. Joe Classified Series review you've ever watched, or you're interested to know if there is any particular quirks, stick around. I'll run you through it, and I'm going to get started with the head. And he's got the ball in the base of the net, ball in the base of the skull. That's your forward there. Not fantastic. His back's pretty good, though, up to there. All the way around, full 360 on the ball joint, and then you can do loads of tilting and swiveling and turning and what have you. Moving down into the shoulder, got the butterfly joint and the peg and the hinge, so you can shuffle forward and back, full 360 all the way around, and then tee him out to there. Swivel at the top of the bicep and tricep on the arms, pinless double elbow that'll get you up to there. Then the pegged in hands that can move on the wrist point, and then both hands left and right have got the up and down hinge. Moving down into the torso, you can see it's the barbell joint in the middle of the figure here, and then the ball joint in the middle, so rather than the standard hinge, it's the the barbell here at the top. So you've got lots of swivel and range of movement in there, although his crunch is about there and his crunch back is about there. The webbing does restrict and get in the way a little bit. However, around the back here, you can see there's a couple of pop studs at the bottom of the webbing that you can pop out, flip it over his head and then slide it down off his legs if you want to take this off. Although, word of warning to the wires, if you take them off, just be careful. The little rubbery pop studs can be a little difficult to press back in, which is why I'm loath to do it now on the review, because it took me ages to get him back on. Going down into the hips and the groin, got the drop-down joint there, giving you forward to here. Russian ballet out to there. Got the swivel there at the top of the thigh. Pinless double knee, that'll get you up to there. Boot cut here at the top of the boot line. And then the hinge and rocker in the feet and ankles. Oh yeah, thumbs up on the articulation. Crazy Legs articulates well. Regulars around these parts know I like the G.I. Joe Classified Series articulation scheme. I think it gives you a wide range of possibilities to engage with it and make your imagination come to life and pose them up in the way that you might want to pose them up. Ironically with mine, considering his name is Crazy Legs, the area of articulation that I had the most struggle with was the legs. They're very, very stiff, the joints in the knees and the ankles in particular. And I had to apply a lot of heat to that to get him to move the way that I wanted him to. Now, as I always say, this could just be my figure, could be unique to mine, but something to bear in mind. I'd recommend a bit of heat on the legs, maybe, folks, before you start moving them around. So there you go. There's the articulation and the posability. Let's now take a look at his accessories and added value, shall we? And the first pair of items on the agenda is the head stuff, the helmet and the goggles. Key part of the visual identity of the character, and obviously ties in quite heavily to the narrative of, around his specialism there. So an essential part of the accessory selection. You can see the head sculpt is a nice sculpt here, got the black sections, giving it a bit of colour in there, or break up the colour in there to bring it to life. The sculpted earpieces, etc., some sculpted contours on the curves across the top. So nice looking, decent helmet. Little flash of red at the bottom of the chin strap there. And then the goggles across the top, which I think we've seen before. The goggles, somebody else has come with goggles like this, I'm pretty certain, but you can see that it's got translucent kind of yellowy green lenses, and then the standard kind of strap that goes around the back of the helmet. And the strap is long enough, or just about long enough. I had to stretch it out a little bit with a wee bit of heat, but long enough to come down over the eyes across the top of the helmet. There you go, like so that you can get his eyes protected if you want to suspend him from the ceiling, or take a shot making it look like he's just leapt out of a helicopter kind of thing. The helmet is quite tight-fitting on the head. It takes a little bit of patience and finessing to get it on there, but it's just a small issue. But as you can see, mine's slightly misaligned because I don't have a lot of patience. But a lot of you guys are better at this stuff than me. And we have a submachine gun here. A very interesting looking piece of kit. I think this is the first time we've seen this outside of the HasLab, of course. So it's a single piece of sculpted, well, it's not a single piece of sculpted plastic, actually. We've got a main body single piece of sculpted plastic, but then we've got the folding butt here with a hinge that brings it around like so. Removable magazine there. There you go, as standard, and the little blast effect port in the barrel. Now, the folding butt, this is like a carryover from the vintage figure, the idea being that he sort of tucks it into his, attaches it to his front there as he's parachuting. And there is just enough clearance in these parachute sections to get it tucked in. There you go, you have to not have the knife in the sheath, but you can see there's enough room there to tuck it in. What I've done is I've popped the magazine out, put it in, and then pop the magazine back there. Although practically, I don't know if there's anyone watching who's, who spent time in a parachute regiment can tell me how the hell this works, because I would just be worried about it falling out while I'm like halfway down or something. But there you go. And Crazy Legs comes with some small arms. He's got this little tiny kind of pistol and a little knifey thing here. The knife is fine, single piece of black molded plastic. No painted blade though, sadly, but it's okay. It does what it says on the tin. He's got the sheath here that you can slide it into like so. Same again with the pistol, really. It's fine. Single piece of molded plastic. Got some sculpted details in there. You're in no doubt as to what it is. Got little sculpted bits on the handle and in the mechanism at the top here. All fine and dandy, and that fits in the holster on his thigh. Comme ça. Voila. And finally, we have his backpack, which is obviously a chute, a parachute there. It's fine, a big lump of molded plastic, lots of lovely molded texture details in here to bring it to life. Could have done with a splash of colour if you ask me, but I always say that about the backpacks. But it's fine and dandy, certainly fits in with the character. One thing I will say though is that his back peg is super long. So when you peg it into the back there, you can see like it sticks out a bit. I don't know, I've tried all sorts of different angles of entry, but it's just a really super long backpack. So I'll be trimming a little bit off that so it sits more flush on his back, and I would recommend you do the same. And as is standard with the retro carded figures, Crazy Legs also comes with the Joe foot stand with the 2 pegs and the Joe logo imprinted into it, which, you know, we've seen a bazillion times before. So yeah, the accessory selection's fine. Thumbs up. It obviously all connects quite nicely to the as I said before, the narrative of his specialism, you know, as a parachute dude. So it all works out and adds up. There's a couple of things I've noticed. The hinge on the submachine gun, when you're getting him in shooty poses, because of the positioning of the hinge. Let's keep him in focus for you. Sometimes you find I'm knocking the hinge like that while I've got him sort of, you know, holding it, and it looks a bit daft, so you have to make sure you've got it straight, and he's shouldering it and what have you. And then because of the short length of this submachine gun, him gripping it can be look a little bit weird. You have to sort of push the hand back and make sure it's you know, it's nicely aligned there. But that is what it is. Again, that's just finessing and fiddling to make it look the way you want it to look. That peg situation on the back's a bit weird, but yeah, overall it's fine. Arguably a bit light. I'm not sure what else I would have expected to be thrown in. Maybe the folded up parachute that came with the Halo jumper or something. That wouldn't have been too difficult for them budget-wise on a piece of reuse. Yeah, I'm not sure, but I always want more. You know, I always want more for my storytelling, what have you. Overall, it's standard. Long gun, short gun, knife, backpack, helmet. You know, it's standard. So there we go. You know, you'll make your mind up as to whether that's added value or not, but there's the rundown of the accessories. Let's now take a look at Crazy Leg next to a couple of other G.I. Joe classified figures, shall we? And okay, folks, to get us started, here is Crazy Legs next to the Halo jumper. Was this Legacy or 60th anniversary? I forget. But nonetheless, you can see quite a big difference in terms of the way that leaping out of plane interpretation sits with both of these. I realise that the Halo jumper's kind of got a different kind of function and way of operating, but look at how badly I've packed his chute in the back there. Just got bits of string everywhere. But there you go, there's one. Here's Crazy Legs next to Mainframe and Hit and Run. Here's Crazy Legs with Quick Kick and Duck. And here's Crazy Legs with Monkey Wrench and Zarana. Okay, folks, well, here's Crazy Legs going around on the turntable so you can get a nice 360 view of the figure. And while you're eyeballing that, I'll offer up some final thoughts. And yeah, he's all right. He's fine. He's he's not the G.I. Joe Classified series figure that's bowled me over the most, but he's also not put me off particularly. He's actually a pretty standard, solid toy soldier, but he's the kind of toy soldier that I like because he's got a nice splash of colour, and therefore he stands out and has a bit more shelf presence. And I think regulars around these parts know how I feel about the kind of just the standard tactical gear, green camoed dudes. I'm all for the brighter colours and the more out there 80s pop culture style stuff, and this works for me in that respect. It really is just about that head sculpt, guys. You know, if you want a nice, I'm in the midst of battle and I'm screaming while I'm shooting, or you know, you could take a photo of him. I've got some action figure stands that I could, with magnetic bases that I can hang from the ceiling. In fact, I might flash over the picture on the screen now so you can see, you know, it looks really cool if you can suspend him from the ceiling and stuff with his mouth screaming. I even played around with a bit of Photoshop. Let me show you it with the background on. What do you reckon to that? But it's just on a standard display, you know, just shelved up with some other figures, he kind of stands out as not quite looking right in amongst the rest. So your mileage will vary hugely as to how much you can get on board with that screaming head or not, or whether you've got the stock or the willingness to do a cheeky head swap. Like I say, I think you could probably do some nice stuff with some head swap in there to make it work. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So I'm going to give him overall a thumbs up, and I'd recommend him if you can get over the face sculpt. That's probably where I'm sitting with it. Okay, there we go. God, I always get a cough right at the end here and have to cut a little bit out. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you found that useful and helped you make your mind up as to whether you want to purchase a Crazy Legs for yourself or not. If it was helpful, if I did, then give us a thumbs up, do the YouTubey stuff, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, blah, 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 blah. All remains to say is have yourselves a great day, have yourselves a great week, and come back around again for another video sometime soon. All right, take it easy, folks.